The morning felt like it had been plucked from a dream. Sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains of my bridal suite, casting a golden hue on everything it touched. I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. My dress fit like a whisper, delicate lace brushing against my skin. The venue was everything I'd ever imagined. Soft lights, white peonies, elegant music floating in the air. And today, I was going to marry the man I thought I'd spend forever with. David. Just thinking his name made my heart flutter. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that danced in my stomach. Not from doubt, no. Just the kind of butterflies you get when everything you've hoped for is finally happening. My vows were folded neatly in my clutch, words I'd written with trembling hands and a full heart. This was it, my moment. And by my side, as always, was Rachel, my sister, my anchor. She looked beautiful too, adjusting my veil like she'd done it 1,000 times. We laughed about old memories, and for a second I felt weightless, like nothing could touch me. Downstairs I could hear the soft hum of excitement, guests arriving, champagne flowing, music warming up. The whole place buzzed with joy. I peeked through the window and saw friends embracing, family toasting, little kids twirling in dress shoes. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt perfect. And as I gripped the bouquet tighter, ready to walk into this new chapter, I had no idea that something was already unraveling behind the scenes. As I made my way toward the ceremony space, the scent of roses mixed with the soft hum of a string quartet wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Every step I took felt surreal. My father met me halfway, eyes a little misty, smile trembling just enough to make my own eyes sting. He squeezed my hand without saying a word. He didn't have to. That squeeze said everything: pride, love, and maybe even a little bit of letting go. I leaned into it, feeling grounded for just a moment. Then I saw David, standing at the altar, straightening his cufflinks the way he always did when he was nervous. He looked handsome, of course, but more than that, he looked like home. Like every plan we made, every night we dreamed aloud, every quiet coffee in the morning, they were all leading to this. He caught my eye and smiled. Not big, not flashy. Just that soft, knowing smile that had once made me believe we could weather anything. My heart felt full to the point of bursting. The ceremony itself? A blur of smiles, tears, and words that meant more than they sounded. We said our vows, sealed it with a kiss, and the crowd erupted into cheers. It felt like joy was stitched into the air. Rachel was right beside me the whole time, handing me tissues, fixing my train, whispering sweet little reminders to breathe and soak it all in. And I did. I soaked in every second, because in that moment, I believed I had it all. But looking back now, I wish I'd paid more attention to the shadows behind the smiles. The reception kicked off like a dream you don't want to wake up from. People laughed like they hadn't in years. Music filled every corner of the room, and champagne flowed like celebration itself. Everywhere I looked, there were people I loved, clinking glasses, telling stories, dancing without shame. I felt wrapped in a bubble of warmth and wonder, floating through the evening on clouds made of joy. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I was exactly where I wanted to be. Rachel delivered her maid of honor speech with ease. She spoke about childhood memories, about the closeness we shared, about how she'd always seen David and me as soulmates. People dabbed tears from their eyes, and I smiled through mine. Her words meant the world to me, because she knew me better than anyone, or so I thought. When she raised her glass and looked at me with that glowing, sisterly pride, I believed every word. I held on to it. I needed it to be real. At one point, I stood off to the side, just watching it all. Watching the people I loved celebrate what I thought was love. And then, just for a second, I noticed something. A flicker. A glance between Rachel and David. It was brief, but it didn't belong. Not in a moment like this. Something shifted inside me, barely perceptible at first, like a thread pulling loose in a perfect tapestry. I shook it off. I told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "Not everything is as it seems." I tried to stay in the moment. Really, I did. I danced, I smiled, I hugged people I hadn't seen in years. But that flicker I saw between Rachel and David, it wouldn't leave me. It lingered like a faint stain on white silk, small enough to ignore, but impossible to forget. Every time I looked over, I caught myself scanning the room for them. They were there, mingling, laughing, blending in with the crowd. But something in my gut told me to pay attention. Then came the moment that changed everything. David had vanished from the dance floor, which didn't seem strange at first. He was probably catching a break, talking to someone, refilling his drink. But when Rachel also disappeared a few minutes later, my stomach clenched. It was subtle, the way they both slipped away, but too close in time to be coincidence. I glanced around, trying not to panic, trying not to create a scene over what could have been nothing. But nothing had never felt so loud. I stepped outside for air, gripping the railing with both hands, breathing deep. The night was cooler now, the laughter behind me muffled by glass. That's when I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was. Jessica, one of my bridesmaids, someone I'd known since college. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with hesitation. "Anna, I didn't know if I should show you this," she said, voice trembling. My heart stopped. She pulled out her phone, and what I saw made my world tilt sideways. It was a photo. Blurry, yes, but unmistakable. David's hand on Rachel's lower back, her face turned toward his in a way no sister-in-law ever should. The timestamp? That morning. The same morning I was getting my makeup done. The same morning I'd called Rachel in to zip my dress. My throat went dry. I stared at the screen, waiting for my brain to come up with some explanation that could make this okay. But nothing came. Just the crushing weight of betrayal crashing into my chest like a freight train. Jessica looked at me like she was afraid I'd shatter right there. I thought maybe it was old, but the nail polish she's wearing, it's the same as today. I noticed it when she gave the toast. My eyes locked onto the screen again. I felt like I was standing outside of my own life, watching someone else's tragedy play out. My sister, my husband, today of all days. My wedding wasn't even over yet, and it was already a lie. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, while the music and laughter drifted out from the ballroom behind me like background noise from a different world. My hands were shaking, but my mind? Sharp. Laser-focused. In that moment, I didn't crumble. I calculated. I saw everything so clearly. If this was going to be the worst day of my life, then they were going to feel it too. I wasn't going to let this betrayal be whispered about in corners. I was going to put it on center stage. I walked back inside like I was sleepwalking, but every step was deliberate. The room hadn't changed. The music still played, glasses still clinked, and people still smiled like nothing had happened. I moved through them, nodding, pretending, performing. But inside, I was rewriting everything. Every memory of David's kisses, Rachel's pep talks, every shared dinner, every inside joke, it all curdled. And suddenly, I wasn't the heartbroken bride anymore. I was something else. I was awake. Back in the bridal suite, I locked the door behind me. The air felt thick with perfume and lies. I stared at myself in the mirror, still in my gown, hair still pinned, makeup still flawless, on the outside. But my eyes, they'd seen too much. I wiped away the fake smile and replaced it with war paint. touched up my lipstick, pressed powder to my cheeks, and fixed every strand of hair that dared fall out of place. If I was going back out there, I was going in with my chin up, and my heart armored. There was no breakdown, no sobbing into a veil, just one clear decision. This day would still be remembered, but for reasons no one expected. I tucked the phone into my clutch, along with the truth it carried. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, walked to the door, and placed my hand on the handle. The celebration wasn't over yet. Not until I gave them something to really toast to. When I stepped back into that ballroom, it felt like stepping onto a stage. No one noticed at first. Just another moment in the blur of a wedding reception, until I picked up my glass and tapped it with the silver knife. The sound rang out, sharp and clean. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The DJ cut the music. And just like that, I had everyone's attention. All those eyes, friends, family, colleagues, looking at me with anticipation, waiting for something sweet and sentimental. I took a breath, my heart thudding in rhythm with the silence. But I didn't tremble. Not anymore. I looked out across the room and found their faces, Rachel's, caught mid-laugh, and David's, already starting to sense something was off. I held my glass up, voice steady. "I want to thank you all for being here today," I began. "It means the world to me to be surrounded by the people I love most." A few smiles, a couple of claps. I let the pause hang, just long enough. Especially my sister, and my husband. Because today, they gave me the greatest wedding gift of all, the truth. Gasps. Audible gasps. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I watched the color drain from David's face and Rachel's mouth fall open like she couldn't decide whether to run or lie. People turned to look at them, eyes wide with confusion, then horror. And still, I kept talking, calm, collected, cold, if I had to be. I wasn't here to plead for sympathy. I was here to hand back the lie they'd given me and let them choke on it. I reached into my clutch and pulled out Jessica's phone. Yes, I asked to borrow it. Evidence needs to be visible. "Some of you may have missed the private pre-wedding celebration my sister and my husband had this morning," I said, holding the screen up high. "Don't worry, I didn't miss it." Gasps turned into murmurs, some hands covering mouths, others grabbing at wine glasses a little too fast. I walked toward the nearest table, placed the phone down, and pressed play. A photo. Then another. Then another. One guest stood. Another peeked over a shoulder. Whispers turned into pointed stares. I could feel the energy shift in waves, confusion turning into disbelief, disbelief hardening into disgust. "I always thought betrayal would feel like fire," I said. "Turns out it feels like silence. Like getting ready for your wedding while the two people you trust most are off creating their own little ceremony without you." Rachel took a step forward. "Anna, wait, this isn't what it looks like." Her voice cracked, hands trembling. I met her eyes, and I swear, for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize her. David didn't say a word. He just stood there, pale, frozen, eyes darting between faces like a child caught stealing. I smiled, just a little. Not out of joy, but out of resolve. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm free. And you? You're welcome to each other." People were frozen in their seats, blinking, processing. I could see my mother shaking her head in disbelief, my aunt whispering prayers under her breath. A few guests had already stood up and walked out, but I didn't stop. I wasn't finished yet. I picked up my champagne flute again, raised it slowly, and let my voice carry. To love, honesty, and starting over. And to learning that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go of what was never really yours. Then I turned, heels clicking on the floor like punctuation marks, and walked toward the towering wedding cake in the center of the room. It was beautiful, layers of vanilla and raspberry, white frosting sculpted like lace. I leaned close to the mic and said, "Congratulations, you two. You can have each other." I took the cake knife in hand, sliced off the biggest piece I could manage, held it up with a smirk, and added, "I'm keeping the cake." The room erupted. Not in cheers, not in outrage, just a stunned collective moment of awe. People didn't know whether to clap or cry. I didn't care. I walked out with my head held high, the sweetness of raspberry on my tongue, and a strange, unexpected calm settling over me. I had just burned it all down. And somehow, it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt different, sharper, clearer, like I'd walked out of a house full of smoke and finally breathed clean again. I didn't look back, not once. People were calling my name, some in confusion, others maybe out of sympathy, but I just kept walking. There was nothing left for me in that room except broken promises and red wine stains. I got into the car someone had arranged, who I don't even remember, and I shut the door like I was closing a chapter I'd never reread. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me. You'd think after a betrayal like that, after years of building a life, I'd collapse. But there was something strangely empowering about it all. I went home, took off the dress, peeled off the lashes, and stood in front of the mirror again, barefaced, tired but intact. I poured myself a glass of wine, kicked off my heels, and just sat in silence. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, the kind that says, "You survived it. Now what?" The days that followed were chaos. People called, texted, messaged me on social media. Some didn't know what to say. Others said everything. My cousin posted a video from the reception, and it spread faster than I expected. Friends I hadn't heard from in years sent me messages like, "You were incredible, and that took so much strength. I didn't plan to be anyone's inspiration. I just wanted to stop being anyone's fool." I filed for annulment the following week. No hesitation, no back and forth. The paperwork felt cold, clinical. Irreconcilable betrayal wasn't a legal term, but it should have been. David never fought it. He knew. Everyone knew. He didn't reach out, didn't beg, didn't even try to spin the story. Maybe he was too ashamed, or maybe he just knew there was no version of this that could be rewritten. The truth was out, and it had teeth. Rachel didn't vanish like I half expected her to. She stayed, tried to smooth things over with family, but it was like watching someone try to put a shattered vase back together with Scotch tape. My parents were livid. My mother couldn't even look at her. My father said less, but the silence between them spoke volumes. At one point, I overheard him say, "You didn't just betray your sister, Rachel. You embarrassed this entire family." And for once, I didn't feel like I had to defend anyone. Let the consequences come. Their affair fizzled fast. Lust doesn't last when it's exposed to daylight and judgment. I heard through a friend that they stopped seeing each other within a month. No declarations of love, no fairy tale ending. Just two people trying to pretend they hadn't detonated someone else's life for a fling. As for me, I began to breathe again. Not deeply, not all at once, but enough to remember who I was before I started defining myself by someone else's last name. In the quiet that followed, I started building something new. It didn't look dramatic or glamorous. It looked like coffee in the morning without crying. Like walking through the grocery store without feeling like everyone was staring. It looked like slowly learning to laugh again without guilt. I leaned into the people who stood by me. Friends who showed up unannounced with wine and playlists. Family who didn't tiptoe around the topic but held space for my anger and my silence. That kind of support, it saves you. I stopped asking why. I stopped replaying it all in my head. Instead, I began asking myself better questions. What do I want now? Who do I want to be when no one else is writing the script? For years, I dimmed myself to fit into what I thought a good wife looked like. Soft, accommodating, always 2 steps behind David's ambition. But standing in the ruins of that false life, I saw a path I hadn't allowed myself to imagine before. One where I didn't just survive, I created. There's something wild and beautiful about realizing you have nothing left to lose. It frees you. I started drawing again, something I hadn't done since college. I opened an online store. I booked a solo trip. And somewhere in between all that, I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't feel grief or anger. I felt powerful. Like I'd been forged by fire, but I came out gold, not ash. A few months later, I ran into someone at the local farmer's market, an old family friend who had been at the wedding. She stopped mid-step, blinked twice, and said, "Anna, I almost didn't recognize you. You look lighter." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. There was something different about the way I stood, the way I moved. I wasn't dragging grief behind me anymore. I was walking forward, finally. She looked at me with that mix of admiration and curiosity people get when they've seen you rise from wreckage. "I'll never forget what you did that night," she said. "I've never seen someone take back their power like that." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because I hadn't realized just how far I'd come. Back then, I thought I was just surviving. But in truth, I was rewriting my story. Life had become quieter, simpler, but in all the best ways. I started working part-time at a local gallery, pouring my energy into art and storytelling. I met new people, not rushed, not searching, just open. And somewhere in that calm space, something unexpected happened. I met someone kind. Someone who didn't fill a void, but saw me clearly in mine. It was different this time. Slower. Truer. Like building trust brick by brick, not falling into it blind. What surprised me most wasn't falling in love again. It was realizing I didn't need to. I was whole without it. But when it came, it didn't arrive like fireworks or grand gestures. It came quietly. In the way he listened when I spoke. In how he remembered small things, like how I take my tea, or the fact that I always buy fresh flowers on Sundays. There were no masks between us, no stories we had to sell each other, just honesty. Gentle, steady honesty. He never asked me about my past in a way that felt invasive. But he listened when I told him, when I wanted to tell him. And the first time I did, he didn't flinch. He just reached across the table, took my hand and said, "You deserve so much better." And for the first time, I believed it. Fully. Deeply. Without disclaimers or doubt. Not because he said it, but because I'd already started saying it to myself long before he came along. Healing wasn't linear. There were days I still questioned things. Still woke up with the ghost of a memory I hadn't invited. But those days grew fewer, and when they came, I didn't spiral. I breathed through them. I reminded myself of what I'd rebuilt. I looked around at my quiet little life, with its early mornings and paint-streaked aprons, and I thought, this is peace. Not loud, not showy, but mine. Entirely mine. One afternoon, I passed by a bridal boutique downtown, the same one where Rachel and I had once laughed over tulle and tiaras, dreaming about our futures. Inside, a young woman stood on a pedestal in front of a mirror, veil tucked into her curls, beaming. Her friends clapped. Her mother wiped away tears. I paused at the window, watching her spin, so full of hope, and instead of bitterness, I felt warmth. Not because I wanted to be in her shoes, but because I hoped her story would be different. She caught my eye through the glass, and I smiled. Just a soft, knowing smile. The kind that doesn't need to say much but carries 1,000 pages behind it. I hoped she felt it, that quiet wish for her happiness, her safety, her truth. Then I kept walking. No lingering, no heaviness, just forward. People still ask me if I regret it, if I'd take any of it back. And honestly, I wouldn't. Because while it wasn't the wedding I expected, it was the awakening I needed. The day I lost everything was the day I started becoming myself.
Sarah, after 20 years, we're going with younger talent, Monica announced between bites of her grilled salmon. Security will watch you clear your office. I stared at the severance package she had slid across the table, as casually as if it were the dessert menu. 20 years of dedication at Rainmore Publishing reduced to a manila envelope. The restaurant bustled around us, oblivious to my world collapsing. I wish you all the best, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. I even managed a smile. Monica looked momentarily taken aback by my composure. She had expected tears, perhaps pleading. What she didn't know was that I had suspected this was coming for months. Ever since she'd been appointed as the new director and started filling the office with fresh graduates, barely old enough to remember physical books. My name is Sarah Ellison. I'm 56 years old and have spent the last 20 years of my life as the Senior Client Relations Manager at Rainmore Publishing in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm not flashy or particularly charismatic, but I'm consistent, thorough, and genuinely care about our clients and their work. In publishing, relationships are everything, and I had built solid ones with our most prestigious authors and corporate clients. The industry is changing, Sarah, Monica continued, pushing her plate away. She was 34, wore designer clothes, and had come from a digital marketing background with minimal publishing experience. We need fresh perspectives, people who understand social media and digital platforms. Of course, I nodded. Times are certainly changing. Monica dabbed her lips with her napkin, clearly relieved that I wasn't making a scene. Human Resources will contact you about your benefits. Your severance is generous. 6 months' salary. We appreciate your years of service. Service. Like I'd been a utility rather than the backbone of client retention. I took a sip of my iced tea, mentally calculating my next steps. My mortgage was nearly paid off, and my daughter had graduated college last year. I had savings, and my husband Thomas's job as an architect was stable. Financially, I could weather this storm for a while. So you're okay? Monica asked, her brow furrowing slightly. Yes, I said simply. I understand business decisions need to be made. As we walked back toward the office, Monica chatting about her plans for reorganizing my department, my phone buzzed with a text from Harold Baldwin, CEO of Baldwin Tech, one of our biggest clients. Lunch tomorrow? Need to discuss the new marketing strategy for the Tech Manual series. Little did Monica know, 3 of Rainmore's biggest clients were waiting for my call, not the company's. My relationship with Rainmore Publishing began in 2003, when I joined as an administrative assistant after a decade in customer service roles. Publishing wasn't my original career plan. I'd studied English literature with dreams of teaching, but I needed flexible hours while raising my daughter. What started as a temporary position evolved into a career I genuinely loved. Over those 20 years, I had worked my way up from answering phones to managing our most valuable client relationships. I knew the favorite coffee order of every author we published. I remembered their spouses' names, their children's birthdays, and which hotels they preferred when visiting Boston. This wasn't strategy, it was simply who I was. Baldwin Tech had been with Rainmore for 15 years, exclusively because of my attention to detail. Harold Baldwin, its founder, trusted me implicitly with their technical manuals and training materials. Harlow Imports had signed with us 7 years ago after I spent 18 months courting them, and New Summit Holdings had been our client for nearly a decade. Together, these 3 clients represented almost 40% of Rainmore's annual revenue. While Monica saw me as an aging relic taking up space that could be filled by someone younger, these clients saw me as their publishing partner, the person who ensured their materials were perfect, on time, and exactly what they envisioned. Security was indeed waiting when we returned to the office. Richard, the guard who had watched me enter the building every morning for the past 12 years, looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry about this, Miss Ellison," he whispered as Monica stepped away to take a call. "It's okay, Richard," I assured him. "Just doing your job." My colleagues watched in stunned silence as I packed my personal items into a cardboard box: family photos, my collection of fountain pens, the small jade plant I'd kept alive since my first day. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others approached with whispered promises to stay in touch. Jessica Adams, my younger colleague who had joined the company 5 years ago, looked particularly distraught. "This isn't right," she hissed, helping me pack my books. "Everyone knows you're the reason half our major clients stay with us." I squeezed her hand. "Things change, Jessica. Companies evolve." "What will you do?" she asked. I smiled, the first genuine one since lunch. "I'll figure something out." As Richard escorted me to the elevator, box in hand, I caught a glimpse of Monica speaking animatedly to the young woman I assumed would be my replacement. She looked about 25, energetic and eager to prove herself. I didn't blame her. This was her opportunity, just as Rainmore had once been mine. What Monica didn't realize was that opportunities could work both ways. On the drive home, I allowed myself 15 minutes of grief. 20 years deserved at least that. I thought about the authors whose books I had helped shepherd into the world, the relationships I had nurtured, the countless late nights ensuring deadlines were met. Then I pulled into my driveway, took a deep breath, and locked those feelings away. Thomas was working from home that day, designing renovations for a historical building downtown. When he saw me walk through the door at 2 p.m, cardboard box in hand, he immediately understood. "They finally did it?" he asked, rising from his desk. I nodded, setting the box down. "Monica took me to lunch. Apparently they're going with younger talent." Thomas pulled me into a hug. After 30 years of marriage, he knew when I needed comfort and when I needed space. "Their loss," he said simply. "Maybe," I replied, pulling back to look at him, "but possibly my gain." That evening, I made 3 phone calls, not to lament my situation, but to set a new course. The first was to Harold Baldwin. We had developed a friendship over the years that extended beyond our professional relationship. He had even attended my daughter's wedding last summer. "They did what?" he exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Sarah, you're the only reason we've stayed with Rainmore all these years. Their production quality is good, but without you managing the process." He trailed off. "I appreciate your saying that, Harold," I said, "but I understand business decisions." "This isn't business. It's short-sightedness," he replied firmly. "Let's meet tomorrow. I have some thoughts." My second call was to Victoria Harlow, CEO of Harlow Imports. Her reaction was similar to Harold's. Disbelief followed by calculation. "We have 3 projects scheduled with Rainmore this quarter," she said, "but our contract renewal is coming up next month. Let's talk before I sign anything." The third call was to Robert Summers at New Summit Holdings, the most reserved of the 3. His response surprised me the most. "Interesting timing," he said. "We've actually been considering bringing our publishing in-house. We just weren't sure how to manage the workflow." He paused. "Would you be open to discussing opportunities, Sarah? Not just for our existing projects, but potentially something more permanent?" By the time I went to bed that night, I had lunch meetings scheduled with all 3 clients over the next 3 days. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was simply exploring options that were suddenly, unexpectedly available to me. The following morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. While I was packing my office, Jessica had slipped me a USB drive containing my contact lists and project templates. Nothing proprietary or confidential, just the tools I had created during my tenure. "You built these," she had whispered. "They're yours." I wasn't starting from scratch. I had 20 years of experience, an extensive network, and now, a newfound freedom to reimagine my professional identity. As I prepared for my lunch with Harold, I realized Monica had actually done me a favor. She had forced me to consider possibilities I would never have explored otherwise. The next day, I arrived at Grendel's Bistro 15 minutes early for my lunch with Harold. I had chosen this restaurant deliberately. It was just 2 blocks from Rainmore's offices, and Monica frequently hosted client meetings here. A small, petty part of me hoped she might see me with Harold, but the strategic part knew appearing confident and in demand was the better revenge. Harold arrived promptly at noon, his imposing 6'4" frame drawing attention as he navigated through the tables. At 62, he still worked 14-hour days and expected everyone around him to match his energy. "Sarah," he greeted me with a warm embrace. "You look well for someone who just had their career unceremoniously upended." "I've always believed in looking forward, not back," I replied as we sat down. After ordering, Harold leaned forward. "Before we discuss your situation, I have news. Monica called me this morning." I raised an eyebrow but wasn't surprised. "And?" She introduced herself as the new client relations director and wanted to schedule a meeting to align on our vision moving forward. Harold's impression of Monica's voice was uncannily accurate, and I couldn't help but smile. "She mentioned they've assigned someone named Bethany to our account. Said she has innovative digital strategies that would revolutionize our approach." "Bethany Wilson," I nodded. 26, marketing degree from NYU. Smart girl, but she's been with Rainmore for 8 months and has never worked on technical publications. Harold's eyebrows shot up. "You know her?" "I make it my business to know everyone who might impact my clients," I said simply. Our food arrived, and Harold waited until the server had left before continuing. "Here's the situation, Sarah. Baldwin Tech has 3 textbooks, 5 technical manuals, and our entire training curriculum scheduled with Rainmore this year. The contract is worth approximately $2 million. I nodded. I had negotiated that contract myself last year. "I have no intention of working with someone who doesn't understand our materials," Harold continued. "But I also can't afford production delays. Our new engineering program launches in September." "I understand," I said, feeling a twinge of loyalty to Rainmore despite everything. "Bethany might surprise you, and the production team at Rainmore is excellent." Harold waved his hand dismissively. "The production team follows your project plans, Sarah. You created the style guides, the workflows, the quality control processes. You're the one who understands what we need." He paused. "So here's my proposal. I want to hire you as a consultant to manage our publishing projects." I nearly choked on my water. "You want to what?" "Hire you directly. We'll still use Rainmore for production, at least for now, but you'll be our representative. You'll manage everything as you always have, but you'll be working for Baldwin Tech, not Rainmore." My mind raced. "Harold, I appreciate the offer, but Rainmore might see that as—" "I don't care how Rainmore sees it," Harold interrupted. "They're the ones who decided you were expendable. I'm just responding to market conditions." He smiled. "And I'll pay you 30% more than your Rainmore salary, plus benefits." As I considered Harold's offer, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria Harlow. "Meeting with new Rainmore rep tomorrow. Not impressed with her preparation. Very eager to speak with you." Then another text arrived, this one from Robert Summers. "Rainmore called. New person doesn't know anything about our specialized formatting requirements. Still on for Thursday?" I looked up at Harold, who was watching me with a knowing smile. "Seems I'm not the only one having second thoughts about Rainmore's new direction," he said. The realization of what was happening, and what could happen next, was both thrilling and terrifying. I had never intended to compete with my former employer, but they had set these events in motion. Now I had a choice to make. "Let me think about your offer," I told Harold. "And let's see what Victoria and Robert have to say." My meeting with Victoria Harlow the following day was even more encouraging. We met at her office in a renovated textile mill overlooking the Charles River. Harlow Imports specialized in European home furnishings and published elaborate seasonal catalogs and design books that required meticulous attention to detail. "I just had the most frustrating call with someone named Bethany," Victoria said as soon as I sat down. "She couldn't tell me whether they could match the paper quality we used last season, and she had no idea about our color calibration requirements." "Those are production details," I said diplomatically. "Bethany's background is in marketing, so she might still be learning the technical aspects." Victoria fixed me with a pointed look. "Sarah, you and I both know that in publishing, the technical aspects are everything. Our catalog goes to interior designers who can spot a half-shade difference in color from across the room." She slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a proposal similar to Harold's, a consulting contract for me to manage Harlow's publishing projects, with a compensation package that made my eyes widen. "I had our legal team draft this after you called," Victoria explained. "We've been considering bringing more control in-house for a while. This seems like the perfect opportunity." I closed the folder, feeling simultaneously flattered and overwhelmed. "Victoria, I'm honored, but I haven't decided what direction I'm taking yet." "Of course," she nodded, "but I wanted you to know that options exist." She paused. "Options that value your expertise appropriately." That evening, I received an unexpected call from Jessica Adams, my former colleague at Rainmore. "Sarah, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered, "but things are chaotic here. Baldwin Tech is threatening to put their projects on hold, and Harlow Imports is suddenly demanding to approve every stage of production personally." I tried to keep my voice neutral. "That sounds challenging." "Challenging? It's a disaster," Jessica continued. "Bethany is completely overwhelmed. She spent an hour crying in the bathroom today after Robert Summers tore apart her production schedule for New Summit's training manuals." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely feeling for Bethany. None of this was her fault. "Monica called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning," Jessica added. "The executive team looks worried. I think they're finally realizing what they've lost." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the 2 contract offers before me. Thomas came in and placed a cup of tea at my elbow. "What's going through that brilliant mind of yours?" he asked, sitting beside me. "I'm considering my options," I replied. "Harold and Victoria have both offered me consulting contracts. If Robert does the same tomorrow..." Thomas took my hand. "Sarah, for 20 years I've watched you put Rainmore's needs above your own. You've worked weekends, taken calls during our vacations, stayed up all night to meet impossible deadlines. You've earned this opportunity. But starting my own consulting business at 56? I shook my head. It seems risky. Riskier than trusting a company that discarded you after 20 years of loyalty? He countered. He was right, of course. The next morning, I woke up with a decision forming. Before I could second-guess myself, I called Harold and Victoria to accept their offers, with one condition. I wanted to wait until after my meeting with Robert Summers before finalizing anything. As I prepared for that meeting, my phone rang. It was Monica. "Sarah," she began, her voice unusually conciliatory. "I was hoping we could meet to discuss a few ongoing projects. It seems there are some transition issues we didn't anticipate." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied calmly, "but I'm afraid I'm booked with meetings for the next few days." "Sarah," Monica's voice took on an edge of desperation. "This is important. Baldwin and Harlow are making unreasonable demands, and we could really use your insight." "My insight?" I couldn't keep the irony from my voice. I thought you were looking for fresh perspectives. There was a long pause before Monica spoke again. Perhaps we acted hastily. I'd like to discuss the possibility of bringing you back as a consultant during this transition period. And there it was. The acknowledgement, however indirect, that they had made a mistake. It should have felt like victory, but instead, I felt only clarity. I'll check my calendar and get back to you, I said, and ended the call. My meeting with Robert Summers took place at New Summit's headquarters in a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Unlike Harold's warmth or Victoria's directness, Robert was calculating and precise, which made his proposal all the more surprising. "We don't want to hire you as a consultant, Sarah," he said after preliminary pleasantries. "We want to bring you on as our Director of Publishing Operations." I blinked, trying to process this unexpected turn. "A full-time position?" Robert nodded. "We publish over 30 training manuals, corporate reports, and marketing materials each year. We've been contracting with Rainmore because we lacked someone with your expertise internally. Now that you're available." He trailed off meaningfully. "I'm flattered, Robert, but I've already tentatively accepted consulting arrangements with Baldwin Tech and Harlow Imports." "I suspected as much," he replied, sliding a prospectus across the table. "Which is why our offer includes the opportunity to build a publishing department from the ground up. You'd have full autonomy, a team of 5 to start, and the freedom to continue consulting for select clients as long as there's no conflict of interest." The salary figure at the bottom of the page made me catch my breath. It was nearly double what I'd made at Rainmore. "This is extremely generous," I managed. "It's market rate for someone with your skills and connections," Robert corrected. "Rainmore was underpaying you significantly." As I left New Summit's offices, my phone buzzed with another call from Monica. I let it go to voicemail. Minutes later, Jessica texted me. "Executive board called Monica in. Looks serious. Baldwin Tech officially put all projects on hold pending review of relationship." This was moving faster than I had anticipated. I needed time to think, to weigh my options carefully. I spent the afternoon in the Boston Public Garden, watching tourists paddle around in swan boats while I considered 3 distinct paths: becoming an independent consultant, joining New Summit, or entertaining Rainmore's apparent reconsideration. By evening, I had made my decision. I called Harold and Victoria first, confirming my acceptance of their consulting contracts. Then I called Robert to discuss a modified arrangement. I would join New Summit as their Director of Publishing Operations, but with the explicit agreement that I could maintain my consulting relationships with Baldwin and Harlow. "That works for us," Robert said, sounding pleased. "When can you start?" "I'll need 2 weeks to set up my home office and formalize my consulting business," I replied. "Perfect. We'll have everything ready." The last call I made was to Monica, who answered on the first ring. "Sarah, thank you for calling back," she said, relief evident in her voice. "We'd like to bring you in tomorrow to discuss a new role we're creating, Senior Client Advisor, reporting directly to me. The board has approved a significant compensation increase." "That's very generous, Monica," I said. "But I've accepted a position with New Summit Holdings, and I'll be consulting independently for Baldwin Tech and Harlow Imports." The silence on the other end was deafening. "You're working for our clients?" Monica finally stammered. "With your clients," I corrected gently. "They'll still be using Rainmore for production, at least for now. I'll just be managing the projects from the client side instead of yours." "But that's—" Monica stopped herself. "Good business?" I suggested. "Adapting to changing market conditions? Finding fresh perspectives?" Another long pause. "The board will want to speak with you," she said finally. "I'm available next week," I replied. Though I should mention that my consulting rates are significantly higher than my former salary. As I ended the call, I felt no malice toward Monica or Rainmore, only a strange sense of gratitude. Being fired had forced me to recognize my true value in an industry where relationships and expertise were the ultimate currency. Sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting and scheming. It's simply rising. 1 month later, I sat in my newly established home office, surrounded by organized project files and a state-of-the-art computer setup provided by New Summit. On my walls hung framed covers of publications I had shepherded through production over the years, a visual reminder of my expertise and legacy. My consulting business, Ellison Publishing Services, was officially registered, with Baldwin Tech and Harlow Imports as my first clients. My position at New Summit was going well. I had already assembled a talented team and was establishing workflows that would elevate their corporate publications. The doorbell rang, and Thomas showed a visitor into my office, Monica. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, looking uncomfortable in my home space. "Of course," I replied, gesturing to a chair. "How can I help you?" Monica looked different. The polished confidence had given way to a harried appearance. "I'll be direct, Sarah. We're struggling without you. Baldwin and Harlow are threatening to pull all future projects from Rainmore. New Summit has already moved their fall catalog in-house. The board is concerned." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "They've asked me to offer you a senior position. Executive Vice President of Client Relations. Full creative control over your department, a seat on the executive board, and..." She hesitated. "A significant ownership stake in the company." I considered her offer for a moment. Just 6 weeks ago, this would have seemed like a dream promotion. "I'm flattered," I said sincerely. "But I've discovered something interesting about myself, Monica. I actually prefer the path I'm on now." "We can match whatever you're making," she pressed. I smiled. "It's not about the money. For the first time in 20 years, I'm building something that's truly mine. The work I'm doing at New Summit is creative and challenging, and my consulting clients value my contribution explicitly." Monica looked deflated. "So there's nothing we can offer?" "I'm afraid not," I replied. "But I'm happy to provide recommendations for my replacement. Jessica Adams has tremendous potential." Monica nodded in resignation and stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. "You know, when I let you go, I thought I was making a bold decision that would modernize the company. I never imagined that I would create an opportunity from it," I finished for her. "Exactly," she said softly. Lesson learned. 6 months later, I hosted a small reception at my home to celebrate the launch of New Summit's redesigned corporate publishing program. Harold Baldwin and Victoria Harlow were there, along with my team from New Summit and a few former colleagues from Rainmore who had since joined my growing consultancy. Jessica Adams was among them, now the client relations director at Rainmore after Monica's abrupt departure. The board had decided they needed someone who understood the value of relationships over flashy marketing strategies. "I still can't believe how everything unfolded," Jessica said as we stood on my patio, watching the autumn leaves fall. "When Monica fired you, everyone thought it was the end of your career." I laughed lightly. "Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage." "Rainmore's still recovering," she admitted. "We lost almost 30% of our client base. The board finally understands that in publishing, relationships are everything." "And how are you finding your new role?" I asked. "Challenging," she smiled. "But I have an excellent mentor who taught me everything I know about client relations." Thomas joined us, placing a gentle hand on my back. "Your guests are asking for a speech," he said with a grin. I had never been one for public speaking, but as I looked around at the gathering, colleagues who had become friends, clients who had become partners, I felt a surge of confidence that would have been foreign to me a year ago. "I won't give a speech," I said, raising my glass. "But I will offer a toast to unexpected opportunities, to valuing expertise, and to the power of relationships." The group raised their glasses and Harold called out, "And to Sarah Ellison, who taught us all that the most powerful response to underestimation is excellence." As laughter and conversation resumed, I took a moment to appreciate how completely my professional life had transformed. What had begun as a devastating dismissal had evolved into something far more fulfilling than I could have imagined. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. I now understood that the true power was never in the title or the office. It was in the relationships I had built and the value I had created. My journey from dismissed employee to respected industry leader was the most satisfying revenge of all.